Ladies and gentlemen, you certainly have heard me talking about this book. It's not about the sex, true stories of human trafficking from a law enforcement officer, a survivor, brothel madam, and an advocate. Don Amo, the author, is my guest. John, good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Thank
Appreciate
you
it.
for, I was going to say for doing the gig with me, but thank you for the work you do. Introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, if you would.
Sure. So I'm an author, and my second book is about human trafficking. I had a book come out last year about the human side of policing with police officers, and um, and so yeah, most of my professional career was in finance and accounting, but I've always had an interest in writing and went into semi-retirement, and here I am.
What is that? What does semi-retirement mean? Exactly. I have a friend that says, "Are you semi-retired?" I said, "Retiring to me means putting four new tires on my car. Then I would be retired." I don't even know what the word means. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is my main purpose as opposed to a corporate job.
Opposed to a corporate job. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure. So I spent a lot of time with technology companies in the finance and accounting area for 35 years or so, and had a good career there, and always been interested in writing, and felt like this was a subject that needed some attention and needed someone to shine a light on. And I really like telling stories and uh, meeting people and turning their stories into interesting plot lines.
And that goes way back with you. What would you say about telling stories?
Well, really, just the last couple years, as far as putting them into a book. Um, you know, listening to their stories. Why is something important to them? And getting the reader to see what they're going through, walk in their shoes, understand their perspective, and something like human trafficking. A lot of people talk about the issues, and you can read a report on it. But with my book, you're taking bullet points and statistics, and I'm turning that into interesting stories based on real case files.
When you your earlier book, tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So that book is called "It's Not About the Badge," and it's the human side of policing. So I would ask people, tell me about a day on the job that you would never forget. And
Mm.
I really wanted to focus on small town, middle America policing. And I got some really interesting stories. I thought I would get a lot of similar stories, and they were really different. And it really focused on, why was that particular day important to you as an officer? If you looked at that police report, you'd probably say it's very routine, and it wasn't that exciting. None of the stories are somebody who saves the subway from a terrorist bombing in New York City. They're more everyday cops that are out there, and really kind of dove into their life, their personal life, how the job and personal life were intertwined, and just found some really interesting stories that I think is an eye-opening experience. It was written during the days of defund the police, so
Mm.
it was pretty timely, and really tried to show that the person behind the badge.
What was that? What was it like for you, if you don't mind, the interviewing process?
Well, it was good. It was very enlightening. Not being a criminal myself, I didn't have a lot of interaction with the police prior. Uh, my daughter is a police officer. She's in the book, and she's a school resource officer. So we talked a lot about what's going on in the schools, and how that's different from being on patrol. And so it was really interesting to um, see what it's like to be a police officer, and how different it is from, say, a regular, I'll just call it corporate job, where you're going to an office, or you're doing construction, or you're going out to a customer's house every day. It's a really different job description, because police officers put themselves in danger on purpose every day for strangers. And there's not a lot of job descriptions like that.
No, certainly not, John. And I agree with you. And you think about that, the police officers, firefighters, whomever, they're running in someplace where people are running away from. You know, you've got a fire and you've got firefighters coming, police officers coming, and you're saying, my wallet's on the side of the bed. Can you grab it for me or whatever? And you're running out, hopefully with a towel on, maybe naked, whatever. And you're asking a stranger to go in there and fight that fire. Or where there's a crime being committed, you're calling a stranger to come intervene and help you. It just blows my mind.
Yeah, because typically a police officer will, when they interact with somebody, it could be one of the worst days of that person's life, especially if it's the victim. And they do that every day. When I was in corporate America, a bad day would be when my budget didn't balance. But that's not life or death situations. And so it's just really different. And that's what kind of struck me with writing that book, is just how different their daily job is compared to a lot of other people.
Uh, Writing this book, it's not about the sex. Tell me about that.
Sure. So when I was writing the police book, I would ask a lot of questions, and I'd end with things like, what's your favorite song? What's your favorite movie? What would you do if you won the lottery? And one of the guys just stopped cold and said, if I won the lottery, I'd quit my job and hunt down human traffickers.
Wow.
And when I
Yeah.
heard that, I realized that was something I needed to pursue. And this was a subject where I knew a little bit about, not a lot. So I really wrote this for, I'll call the average citizen out there, somebody who's not an expert, it doesn't have that depth of a knowledge. And they're going to see all the things that I saw, learn all the things that I did from interviewing and research, but they're going to see it in an interesting storyline as opposed to reading a report. And I felt like this was something that is really evil that
Mm.
someone can perpetrate against another person. And I felt like, the only way to solve problems is to first be aware of what's going on. And this deals with a lot of misperceptions that people may have, and kind of shines a light on what's going on out there.
When you it's obviously surprised you. I mean, there's a lot of things I'm sure that certainly I wasn't aware of, but you, John, couldn't have been aware of when you started doing the research for the book. What's the? I mean, I'm sure a lot of things stick out, but
Yeah,
what
a couple
surprised?
things
What
are.
shocked you? Go ahead.
Yeah, so what's shocking is I knew that there were problems on the border, and in big cities, foreign countries, things like that. What surprised me was that it's going on in nice communities, suburban, cities, small town America. That really surprised me. The second thing was that, and it's really something that nobody talks about, is 45% of the underage kids being exploited are boys. And I think that's surprising to people. And then finally, the kidnapping piece is, people think that it happens because people are snatched off the street corner, thrown into a van like in some Hollywood movie. And in fact, that's about 5% of the victims out there. It's really through people you know. It could be your family, it could be a neighbor, school, someone that you're just having acquaintance with. It's really not that much targeting to total strangers. There's some connection that the victim has when they're first getting exploited, and I think that surprises a lot of people.
That surprised me even in the introduction when you wrote about it, where you said 85% are trafficked are born in the United States, 60% of exploited children are recruited by their peers, only 5% of those trafficked are kidnapped. And 10% of the pimps are women, et cetera, et cetera. And you're writing in your book, it's not about the sex, true stories of human trafficking from a law enforcement officer, a survivor, a brothel madam, and an advocate. John, I was surprised. I think most of us think different, very, very differently about
Right.
it. Yeah,
Yeah, I would not have guessed any of those things a year and a half ago when I started this project.
yeah. And again, I love the dedication. I've got to mention, dedicated to all those seeking to end human trafficking, especially survivors, advocates, and law enforcement, and to your daughters.
Yes.
That was very, very nice. Very nice. Also, again, that book is "It's Not About the Sex: True Stories of Human Trafficking from a Law Enforcement Officer, a Survivor, a Brothel Madam, and an Advocate." Of course, we've got links up at louisfreeshow.com. Just go directly to itsnotabout.com. It's not about.com. The interviewing process and finding the people that you talk with about in the book. Tell me about that.
Sure. So I started out knowing nobody, and started making some phone calls to try to introduce myself and um, tell them about the project. Some of the people had great ideas of, hey, you want to talk to a law enforcement officer, you should talk to this person. And it was just a matter of making connections and trying to network with people. I had several people that were not interested in being profiled, they for whatever reason. Um, and it just was a matter of just trying to meet people and find out who wanted to have their story told, because it's not just stories about human trafficking. There's a person, there's a picture of this person, and part of it is just finding somebody who was ready to tell their story. In the survivor community, there's a lot of people who just don't want to tell their story. It's just too painful. There's too much trauma, etc. And so it was just persevering with those folks and going through lots of interviews, lots of um, case files, and then going back to them and saying, "Hey, this is what I wrote about you. I've literally put words in your mouth and thoughts in your head. Is that an accurate representation of you? Does it capture your personality?" I really wanted the readers to get to know this person, and because there's dialogue, there's action, there's plot lines. So uh, it needed to make sense from all those perspectives, and so there was a lot of collaboration with all the people profiled in the book.
And you again, you have them all by the chapters, and I love that. And obviously, we're not doing the book, folks. The book is over 300 pages. We're certainly not going step by step by step by step.
Right.
We'd like you to get the book and read the book and better understand. But let's talk about Janelle and that I mean, again, the documentation blows my mind. How many hours later, et cetera, et cetera. I'm thinking again, my age thing. I can't remember what I was doing 20
Sure.
minutes
So,
ago. But this is
you know,
great. It's great how you
yeah,
laid it
so
out.
Janelle is she's an advocate for victims who are just getting out of their situation, trying to help them become survivors, and she's a case manager essentially. So as a teen, you can imagine there's lots of systems that you have to navigate, whether it's the foster system, criminal justice, um, school system, various nonprofits that might be helping you, and trying to figure all that stuff out is not an easy thing to do. And so that's what she does. And the story starts out with her deciding to change her life, to dedicate it to start a nonprofit and really help these kids. And so the story talks about how does she come to that conclusion, and then some of the most memorable cases that she dealt with. And we changed some dates and names and
Sure,
some of the details to to protect these
sure.
folks. But essentially it's all fairly accurate, giving a portrayal of what happens. One of those plot lines is somebody who is groomed online from a predator over the course of a couple of months, and then they meet up and eventually he gets her hooked on drugs. And that's a very real scenario that parents need to know about, because there's lots of predators out there, and maybe they're not looking for human trafficking, but they may be looking for pictures, which is going to be child pornography. They may be looking to exploit somebody. and those tactics are pretty much the same uh, for the predator. What their end goal is could be different than trafficking, but there's lots of other bad outcomes. And so I think it's really helpful for parents, grandparents to be aware of some of those tactics that the predators are using, especially with technology that kids are really comfortable with, but a lot of adults are not savvy with the ways that technology and the nuances there. There could be hidden folders, hidden chat rooms, special apps, those kinds of things. It may not be obvious if you just look at that teen's phone.
Yeah, and again, when obviously adults much younger, decades younger than I, you think you understand the technology, but really have no idea. It's the kids. It's the young people that are raised with the technology that really understand it. Like you say, hidden chat rooms, etc. That I would have no clue as to how to use it, how to get to it, even to look for it. I wouldn't even know where to look for it. That's
Yeah,
what.
I
Go
mean,
ahead.
yeah, because adults, like myself, very good in Excel, PowerPoint, Microsoft Word, but these things are not happening there. These predators are on social media. And a lot of these kids have been online since they're 5 years old, unsupervised since, third or fourth grade. And so they're spending a lot of time online. Every one of these games or applications has a private messaging, has a chat feature, etc. Well, that's where the predators hang out. And so a lot of parents, they think their kid's safe because they're sitting at home at the kitchen table watching them make dinner, when in fact the predator's in the pocket because their phone's in their pocket.
Yeah, and we adults or older folks don't know how to access it, etc. And as much as you feel you're communicating or may be communicating with your child, there's
Right.
things that obviously you're not going to know about. And by the way, John, I love the chapter of what you can do, because
Mhm.
in reading the book, again, it's not about the sex. You read it, and you understand. I don't want to say you understand. You get an overview of the problem, but then
Right.
what? And that's
Right.
part of it. Go ahead.
Yeah. It's like, now what? I wasn't at the beginning intending. I didn't even think about doing that kind of a chapter. And then my wife read the book, and she said, "Okay, well, now what am I supposed to do?" And so we talked about it, and then I
For her.
tried to add some tips and some bullet points of what people can do. It first starts with awareness. It starts with action. Uh, there's many things you can do, anywhere from helping nonprofits that work with these people, or even pressuring legislatures to change laws, strengthen laws against trafficking.
One of the other things that was interesting to me is how you talk about suburban, rural areas, etc. Because
Right.
I think the perception, myself guilty included, I'm thinking, well, I know there's a lot of truck stops out this way uh, because of where we are geographically. There's truck stops, and it's happening there, and some of those hotels, motels, whatever that are out there. That's the perception. I'm not saying that's not a reality. Obviously, that is because of some of the things that have happened that we're aware of in this area. Yet, most don't think, I certainly didn't think about it as with the suburban and rural population.
Yeah, it is it is one of those things that's a misperception that a lot of people are not aware of, is that it's happening right under everyone's radar in these nice small towns and every county in the country. And that's why I put in some specific plot lines happening in nice communities, where you look at a kid who's a runaway or a homeless teen, the first thing you say is they're vulnerable, and of course they are. But the surprising thing is the same kind of exploitation can happen to someone still living at home, going to school, in a household where you don't think that that person's at risk. And I wanted to show some specific stories about that. And you that shows up in several chapters. And then the survivor in my chapter, Angela, small town Iowa, out in the middle of farm country. And that type of thing does happen. That was also a family member who was exploiting her, and that's a whole other way that can happen. And I wanted to show a story that was different than say somebody who is being exploited by a peer. This is somebody that was in her family doing that, and nobody talks about that. And so I wanted to show that as a different um, storyline, so people can get a feel for. There's not just one way that this happens. There's lots of bad ways it can happen.
And surprising, you were surprised. I certainly was surprised
Yeah,
in uncovering some of this in the different ways in the rural and suburban areas that it's happening, and where you wouldn't have that perception, wouldn't
I had
think.
no idea
Yeah,
before,
I certainly
getting
did
into
not
this.
before
Yeah.
reading the book. Go ahead, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it was something that was a big surprise, and I wanted to focus on small town, middle America, everyday America, and show that it can happen, in your own backyard, so to speak, and wanted to do some of those storylines. And really, when you talk to people about this subject, one of the first things that somebody asks is, how does this happen? Why do they stay? Um, why don't they just run away? Why can't police get these guys easily? And I wanted to show answers to those questions through the storytelling, through the plot line. So you're seeing how somebody is groomed, how they fall into the trap, why they can't get out, why it's difficult, what law enforcement is doing, some of their tactics to try to catch these criminals, to answer some of those basic questions that I think the average person asks. Because that certainly was one of the questions that I had going into this is, well, how does this happen?
So, yeah.
And I think the stories there's enough of several storylines that show how that happens, and it touches, I think, on all the major pieces, whether it's someone still going to high school, whether it's a runaway, et cetera. Um, and really trying to bring not just awareness to the issue, but if you can recognize signs that someone's in trouble or someone's being groomed, that's a really powerful thing to know, because it may be that stranger you see in McDonald's. It may not be your kid or grandkid, but maybe it's someone on their soccer team, or that really quiet kid in the back of the class. Maybe there's a few questions you can ask as a concerned person.
Yeah, I'm thinking back in Janelle's chapter about how she was able to uncover it, and the difficulties in uncovering it. Like you're saying, we don't know. You
Y-
don't know who, you don't know how. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, the studies have shown that a victim can be seen up to 9 times by someone without being identified. And that someone could be someone in the court system, the foster system, the school system, medical profession, et cetera. And a lot of the people, when they're in these situations, they're they're really broken psychologically. They feel a lot of shame. They feel like they have no hope. They've been told by their pimp that no one's going to help them, the authorities don't care, etc. So they're really broken in that way, and a lot of times that factors into why they may be seen by a doctor, for example, or someone in the, a social worker type of thing, and they don't talk about it, and so it falls through the cracks again.
Yeah, like you say, they don't. Of course, they don't talk about it. I'm certain there are some that are maybe more forthcoming or whatever, but generally, kids or adults, I'm gonna say adults, but kids aren't going to, anybody that. Again, my personal experience, I've talked about a lot, being sexually molested when I was young. Obviously, I didn't talk about it. I didn't
Yeah,
go somewhere and say, hey, by the way, this guy, you know,
Did this, yeah. It's
yeah,
it's a it's a traumatic experience, and
yeah,
what people have to realize is that it's a traumatic experience that happens many times daily, many times multiple times a day. So you're talking about not just one incident, but a many incidents that have really weighed down this person. And so it's just people just don't jump out and raise their hand and say, "Hey, I'm a victim. Come and help me." That's just not how the human brain works. Because a lot of times they're trying to suppress it. They're trying to process what's happened and how they got in that situation. And again, their pimp is constantly trying to manipulate them. And I've talked to different survivors, and many of them say that they have to be removed from that situation many years before they're able to talk about it and really be able to tell a perfect stranger. And if you're talking to a police officer or someone in the school system, they may be a total stranger, and you may feel very uncomfortable talking about it. And so a lot of times the survivors, it takes years for them to really talk, and many of them don't want to deal with it, or interact with people, because it just brings up a lot of bad experiences, and they don't want to deal with that because it's just easier to not talk about it.
John, you good time wise? Stay a
Yes.
little bit. Ladies and gentlemen, top of the hour, you're listening to Louis B. Free Radio Show, Brainford from the Heartland, copyright B. Free Radio Limited, 2022, produced by the lovely Miss Bunny Face in cooperation with White Rabbit Productions. The book, It's Not About the Sex, True Stories of Human Trafficking from a Law Enforcement Officer, a Survivor, a Brothel Madam, and an Advocate. The author, John DiGirolamo, is my guest. Website is it's not about.com. It's not about.com. Towards the, again, I know I'm jumping all around. And I've got, of course, underlined. Many believe human trafficking is something that happens in big cities or on our borders. And we talked about it a little bit earlier, but for those just joining us, the victims were most likely to be someone in your very own family, from the beautiful suburbs to small country towns. It's happening right under our noses, and it needs to be addressed, and awareness needs to be out there. And again, I love the what you can do section of the book, because we talked, again, forgive me for repeating, John, but we talked about it earlier. Like your wife said, okay, you read the horror stories, you read about it. It's like, okay, what do I do? I know there was
Right.
a motel out by the truck stops in this area,
Hmm.
and they had, I think, soap in the shower with a label of a number to call if you're, little things, whether that's
Right.
works or not, little things that the victims can do. But what about the rest of us?
Yeah, I think it there's a couple of pieces. One is to look for some grooming signs, and this is prior to them being exploited. So if you look at the criminal element, there's two kinds of pimps, a gorilla pimp and a Romeo pimp. And the Romeo, as that name implies, is typically an older boyfriend. They're working on a relationship that they're really looking to exploit somebody once they can get them vulnerable. So a couple of grooming signs could be something like a second cell phone. That's when you really need to start asking questions. If there's unexplained gifts, they have new jewelry, new clothes, new friends that they're secret about. Those are definitely some grooming signs that you want to be aware of, um, because it could mean that they're heading down that path. Now, the second piece of that is if they're already in an exploitive situation, if there are behavior signs such as somebody who is very fearful, doesn't make eye contact, needs permission to go to the bathroom or just do kind of simple tasks. They don't have money. They don't have a lot of personal possessions. And that may be somebody you see in McDonald's or at a rest stop or something like that. And those are kind of signs that people should be aware of. and there's a hotline that that you can call that is pretty well maintained and refers to local law enforcement to investigate that kind of situation. So being aware of some of those grooming signs that somebody might be at risk, and then looking at some behavior signs of what's happening right now, that they could be in an exploitive situation. And that can also be in labor trafficking, because that's, I didn't write about that in the book, but it's a different demographic. It's more on the immigrant community. It's typically more men. It's typically adults, because they're making them work in farms, construction, massage parlors, etc. But they're also going to be very submissive and not really in control of what they're doing, because they're controlled by somebody else. And being aware of some of those signs is something that everybody should know about.
One of the things that in that what you can do section of your book, and the book is "It's Not About the Sex." Yeah, you write about 60% of children exploited in prostitution are recruited by peers. That
Right.
was another fact that I found mind blowing, if you will. Recruited by peers.
Yeah, so it's typically, if you look at, say, a teen, there could be uh, a friend, a boyfriend, and then the other piece is online friends, because a lot of teens, once they've started a relationship with somebody online, they're calling them their friend. They may not have met them in person, but they're calling them a friend, and it's someone that so they're not a stranger. They're my online friend, but in fact, they're probably not, right? They're probably there for nefarious purposes. And many times what happens is there could be an older female who is essentially recruiting younger girls. Now, you see that in headlines in, say, the Jeffrey Epstein case, where Ghislaine Maxwell was essentially recruiting these younger girls. So they look at her as a little more trustworthy because she's another female and acts like a big sister type of thing. And but they're really for those insidious purposes. And so I wanted to show some of that in the plot lines in the story, so people can see how that works.
Yeah, yeah, and very important, like you say. Some of the things I think that for someone like aged person like myself with social media, I mean, people will say, and I do it more professionally than personally, but people say, well, if they're being argumentative with me, well, you're friends with them on Facebook. Well, friends on Facebook for me isn't. I do have close friends that are friends with me
Right,
that are friends on Facebook. Most you don't know. You really don't know. I've met
right.
people. In fairness, I've met people through Facebook in other countries, etc., that I have become friendly with and communicate with. That's rare for me, for an old guy. We don't realize what it is in social media for young people. We just can't really conceptualize what it means and why young people are constantly on that, especially if they're looking for love, or think they're looking for love, or looking for friendship on social media.
Yeah, they're
I
they're
don't think
looking
that's
for some kind of affirmation of something. And if you look at the pandemic we've had, what did it do for teens and kids? It took them out of school,
yeah,
put them at home
isolated.
online, where they spent even more time trying to find social interaction with somebody. And a lot of times those were these online strangers. And the difference in the generation is kids are going to look at having 1,000 friends or followers
Yeah.
as a goal rather than a problem. And you and
See,
I, if we get a message on Facebook or some other social media account that looks a little sketchy, it's whatever, delete, no big deal. But teens, kids, they're not as savvy, and if they're really looking for something, then they're going to react. And one of the stories in my prior book about the police was about a girl who um, was approached by somebody online, and they quickly had this, quote, relationship. And within a week, he was asking for topless pictures.
Mm.
She sent them. Then he started exploiting, blackmailing her. And they eventually went to the police. And that's how it got into the book, because it went to the police. And it turned out that this guy was a fake account and was in a foreign country. And of course, you're never going to track somebody like that down. And all this happened within a week. And you ask, well, why would this girl do all those things? And part of it is they've 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 gotten somebody online who's just telling them, who's feeding them, right? It's, you're beautiful, you're special, your parents don't appreciate you, I appreciate you, I understand you, don't listen to your friends, they're not looking out for you, I am. But
Yeah.
at the same time, they're asking for pictures or something like that. So it's, the teen brain works differently than an adult brain, and it's already difficult being a teenager. It was always difficult,
Yeah.
but
Always.
now you've got these predators that are out there, because in the old days, you wouldn't let your 11-year-old, 13-year-old wander the mall and talk to 20 strangers. So why would you let them go online and talk to 20 people online?
Yeah, exactly. And that's some of the things again we don't see. I didn't realize, and I had an Instagram account. I still don't. I'm not savvy with Instagram. I'm never going to be savvy with any of the social
Yeah.
media at my age. But I didn't realize you could actually get calls from Instagram, and it was a scam call. I
Hmm.
got it, but it's like I'm getting a call through Instagram. I didn't, and then I learned that there's Instagram messages, et cetera, et cetera. And that's after having the account for a long time. So we adults, like you said earlier, especially older people like myself, don't know what all is going on. Again, the hidden things, et cetera, that you talk about and write about, John. A comment from a former federal prosecutor, and now great author, Meg Nossero in Florida, says, disgusting predators, family members too. I always believe my kids. It's exhausting being a parent these days. We're all doing our best, having those important conversations. Communications are huge. For those that do have those conversations, and again, I don't know what the percentage is. I'd like to believe that that's more and more parents are having the important conversations, yet many are not. And even if they are, the kids could be deceptive or even aggressive.
Absolutely. Yeah, because even if you've taught your kids, they may not be looking for trouble, but trouble is looking for them. And these predators are going to, they're going to send out 100 friend requests, and maybe a small percent reply, but if they get a reaction, that's who they're going to pursue. And so it's a numbers game for them. And if the kid is unsupervised, and not every parent is a great parent, and they may be working a lot and being in a single parent household, something like that. And so the kid is just left online, and it's just too easy to fall into a trap.
And John, one of the things, again, my personal experience recently with that call, obviously this individual did a little bit of research. I'm very active with animal rescues and animal advocacy, et cetera. And
Right.
that's what on his, if it was him, uh, account, there was like, in another country, we're rescuing these animals, we need help, et cetera, et cetera. So obviously a little bit, just a little bit of looking at my account and seeing what I posted or what I liked. And
Right.
I can't even imagine for a young person that are posting everything about themselves. Again, I don't post a lot of personal stuff.
Right.
I
Right. I mean, these kids post
everything.
multiple times a day everything that they're doing. So it wouldn't take a lot of effort for somebody to go look at a kid, figure out what are their interests,
Hmm.
maybe what they're worried about, or what they're, if they have a self-esteem issue about a particular item, then they'll look at that and they'll figure that out and try to
Exploit it,
uh,
right?
yeah, try
That's
to
how.
exploit it. Exactly. And people, and especially kids, they're generally trusting people, and that plays into what a predator's hoping for, because they're looking for somebody who potentially could be vulnerable for whatever reason. And that your child might be very smart, strong, and savvy at 14, but who knows what they're going to be like at 15, because all those years growing up, everybody has ups and downs, and there may be a weak moment. And a parent should be monitoring what's going on, should limit time online, should know what applications their child is using, and checking that, and really kind of limiting, because there's so many applications out there. There's romance applications and interactive, you know, stories with relationships and stuff like that. And a lot of those are they're directed for adults, but there's no process to say, well, I'm 14, can I still join this, download this app, etc. Well, they still can. And so now you've got a mix of 14-year-olds and adults. And it's just, if the parent's not paying attention, then there's just more of a chance to get in some kind of trouble. Now, there are programs out there that parents can do to monitor their kids' activities, and those are guardrails. They're not going to be fail-safe, but you have to check often. You can't just install it once and say, well, we're done. I'll uninstall it when you turn 18. That's not how it works.
Yeah, you've got to be very, very proactive. And again, not having little ones or not having grandchildren, I can't even imagine today some of the things and some of the apps and some of the things that are out there. John, I've got to ask you about Brianna Leary. Surprising. That was in the book. And of course, that book It's Not About the Sex, True Stories of Human Trafficking from a Law Enforcement Officer, a Survivor, a Brothel Madam, and an Advocate. Uh, Surprised. You're surprised. How that came about. Can you address that a little bit?
Sure.
Or
So I was pretty much wrapping up the book. It was in proofreading, editing, and I was doing a presentation about my police book. And there happened to be a county sheriff, and we were talking about policing, and then I was talking about the book that was coming out soon. And he said that he knew somebody who had worked on a task force in Colorado against sex trafficking. And I was looking for people to endorse, give a quote on the back of the book type of thing. And so then he went on to say, I also know a survivor who, it's been many years, but she's starting to really want to talk about what happened to her and bring awareness to other people, so other people don't run into the same thing that she's run into. And so I contacted this person who had worked on the task force. This lady who was a former police officer uh, didn't want to read the book. Just was doing other things. And then I talked to this survivor, Brianna, and I had said, "Hey, I'm looking for a quote. I'm hoping that a survivor will find this authentic." So I sent it to her, and I was expecting 2 or 3 sentences, and I got back 1,300 words. And I said, well, this is more than a quote. And I said, it's such a raw story. It's a compelling story. It's in your own words. And you're wanting to, she said that she's now brave enough to talk about it. And I said, what do you think about putting this in the back of the book, just in your own words? And she really liked the idea. And she starts out her story saying, I have good days and I have bad days, but I'm feeling very blessed. And when you start out saying that you're blessed, going through what she went through, you a person who hasn't gone through that has to pause and say, wow, how does somebody go from being a traumatized victim to a survivor that's out of this situation to now having the life perspective of feeling blessed? That's that's a transformation. And I really wanted to support her and give her a voice. And so we just threw it in at the end, word, pretty much
I
word
love
for
that.
word of what she said to get her voice out there.
Yeah, I love that. And again, coming upon that in the book, that book is It's Not About the Sex, True Stories of Human Trafficking from a Law Enforcement Officer, a Survivor, a Brothel Madam, and an Advocate. John DiGirolamo book. Again, it's about com. You can get more information. Availability of the book, and you can get a signed copy through your website, by the way.
Yeah, you can get a signed copy from my website. It is also selling on Amazon where you can get Kindle. There's a great audio version. The lady did a great job reading through that book. So if you like audiobooks, I highly recommend you checking that out. That's all on Amazon, and you obviously can get paperback there too.
Yeah, obviously, and of course we've got those links up. Or just go directly to Amazon if you prefer, or it's not about.com for more information. It's not about.com. John, a couple more minutes if you don't mind. What kind of reaction are you getting? It's it is an education for me. You think you know. Forgive me. I'm asking you a question and I'm jumping in. You think you know, you think you read the news, and I do read the news a lot, and you think you're, I don't want to say savvy, but somewhat knowledgeable. Your book blew my mind, and all those preconceived notions out the window.
Yeah, I've had strangers come up to me and say that they really appreciated uh, the book and what it meant to bring awareness. I've had a couple of survivors contact me afterwards that really were happy that it felt like it was giving them an authentic voice, and they really felt like they could connect with the people in the book and really understand and relate to what they were doing. So I feel pretty good about it being a real accurate portrayal
Yeah,
of what's going on. I've had people say that I read your book, it was very upsetting,
it's
and
very upsetting.
it was, there's some dramatic moments in there, um, but they said that they didn't put it down. They just had to take a breath and uh, and and then go and read it, because as an author, the kiss of death is somebody saying they're bored, right? And
Sure. Yeah.
so I wanted
You're
to create this fast-paced plot line where we really kind of understand what's going on. It's not graphic, it's not salacious,
right.
it's not some kind of erotic thriller or something like that, but it gives you enough detail that you know what's going on. And I think you really get to know the people that are in the book and really kind of see what they're going through. And and I think they're very relatable, because you probably know a teenager who is online all the time, or somebody who maybe not in that situation, but we all know people who are vulnerable, people who might be depressed, and maybe you don't know the reason for that. What's that background? And it could be something totally different, but it could be trafficking. And I think looking at some of those signs, asking some questions, being that compassionate, concerned person is where we need to go, because it's similar to, say, the sex abuse issue. Nobody wants to talk about it. It happens in families. It happens in all kinds of different places. It's an uncomfortable subject, and that's absolutely true. And trafficking is kind of like that, where people don't want to talk about it, but the more that we're aware of it, the more that maybe we could stop the cycle, because uh,
Hopefully.
it's a cycle that needs to be stopped.
Yeah, and I certainly agree. And again, I'm not comparing situations at all, but being abused. When I look back and understanding the grooming, the process, what was going on with me at the time, etc., to be able to look back, and it was, I think, a couple of decades before it really. I know that a lot of people don't like the idea of recovered memories, but then you start thinking about it, or it's kind of comes back because you've buried it so far away. And
Right.
people don't want it. Obviously, I didn't want to for years. I didn't tell anybody. Again, I'm not comparing the same with trafficking, but the grooming, I understand. And I'm reading your book. It's not about the sex, John. And I'm thinking that grooming process and looking back and thinking about it, because I never really thought about, for me personally, the grooming, the process.
Right.
I've thought about what happened and how weird it was that it happened, yet not about the grooming. And that's one of the things. It's not about the sex, about the grooming of these kids, vulnerable kids. And you get an education with your book. And by the way, you said the worst thing boring. This book is not boring. It's educational. Yeah, it's not salacious, like you said, John. It's horrifying to think about it today. And again, the access, because of social media, etc.,
Right.
that these predators have. Again,
Because they don't
I'm in
need
my
physical
70th
access.
years. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, they don't need physical access, right?
Yeah,
In the past, you needed to physically be
sure.
in the household or nearby or a neighbor
Yeah,
or something like that, right? But today, that access can be online because the great equalizer is Wi-Fi. It doesn't matter whether you're in downtown New York City or
yeah, that's good.
middle of nowhere. If you're online, every predator can see you, whether it's in this country or a different country. And it doesn't matter if you're black, white, rich,
Yeah.
poor, young, old, etc. You're now visible because of that great equalizer of Wi-Fi.
And that's going to get, I hate to say worse, but it expands. I mean, I think about the internet. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when the internet, I'll say, started, and the
Right.
old computer, and now that it's on a phone. I mean, you had to be, I remember dial up. I don't know, you probably
Yes,
don't
I'm
remember
definitely old enough to remember
dial
the
up. And
sound of the modem and
yeah.
rotary phones. Because again, it's that generational difference. The kids today, a 15-year-old was born in 2007. So
Oh,
that doesn't sound like a long time ago, right?
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so
I'm
that
laughing.
doesn't sound like a long time ago to old guys like us.
Yeah.
But what's been the internet has always been there. Social media has always been there. Smartphones have always
Yeah.
existed. And that is a different mindset, especially when you start out when you're 5 years old. I mean, the joke of all the friends my age, and I'm sure for you too, is, oh, your phone's messed up. Well, go ask your 10-year-old. They'll fix
Yeah.
it in 2 minutes.
Yes. Yes. And go ahead. I mean, that's accurate. I was just talking the other day about the scroll down when you swipe down on the phone now, which everybody does to get different menus, etc. Many years ago with mine, I was sitting somewhere waiting, and there was a kid next to me and his mom, and he, swiped down, and this whole other menu came up, and then I asked her. I said, "Do you mind if I ask him how he did that?" Because here I
Right,
am. I was a kid. It was
right,
a young kid,
right.
and I didn't know. I didn't know that was available. I didn't know it existed. But you're right. You ask a young person because they know.
They're grown up with it. They're very comfortable with it. And let's face it, their phones are attached to their hip. If
Yeah,
their phone breaks, it's devastating
yeah,
to a 15-year-old. Where maybe with us it'd be a nuisance, not so much of
sure.
you
An
know
inconvenience. Yeah,
right, my whole life is over because I can't find out what everyone's doing and what
yeah.
they're posting and what their Snapchat story is, etc. And it's a different mindset of today's child and teenager because you know and you see it, you go anywhere, it's not just teenagers, but there's elementary school kids and they all have phones.
They all have phones, and they understand it and know how to use it, and can be, I
Yep.
don't want to say deceptive, but they can hide. They know how to hide things from parents. on the fact that we
Absolutely.
or
There's
grandparents who wouldn't have a clue.
Well, Snapchat is one of those very popular programs. So as a parent, maybe you go check your kid's phone and you're looking at their Snapchat story and it looks fine. But what many people don't know is there's a hidden folder called My Eyes Only on Snapchat, and that's where many people hide inappropriate photos or situations or whatever. And many people don't know about. I didn't know about this until last month when somebody told me, yeah, there's this hidden folder on Snapchat. And so many programs have these secret folders and those types of things. So even if you are an active parent and you're looking at stuff, if you don't know about the secret folders, then you're only seeing half the stuff.
Yeah, and that's where the stuff obviously that they want to hide or keep
Right.
personal is where they put it. John DiGirolamo, I'm honored to have you. Your work is so important. Again, very educational to me, passionately written, obviously, not salacious like you were saying earlier, but eye-opening doesn't even begin to blew my mind in
Yeah.
my old hippie speak. It blew my mind. It just so many of the things that I know I'm repeating myself, John, that you think you know about trafficking, those preconceived notions or those generalities that, like I was saying earlier, it happens out at the hotels and the truck stops in this area. That's human trafficking. That's where it's happening, or someone at a mall somewhere. And just to learn the depth of it. And again, the rural, the suburban, the aspect of it just is mind blowing and so important and educational because again, people are always, I feel I was always looking out there somewhere where that's happening. And it could be happening in my neighborhood. It could be happening to one of the kids in my neighborhood. And that's frightening.
Exactly.
Again, that
Yeah.
what to do, what to do section of your book. It's not about the sex is so important for people to have the, like you said about your wife. Now what do I do? And it's a little overwhelming, but then you read what to do and it's so important. So I'm grateful that you do what you do. Both of your books, very important. And certainly it's ongoing for you, correct? I'd want to ask you what you're working on now. I mean, just completed the book, but
Yeah,
ongoing
so
effort for
yeah,
you,
so
if you don't
I am
mind.
working on a new book, and the theme of this book is going to be people who fight evil. And I've interviewed an undercover police officer who poses as a 13-year-old girl and arrests guys at the motel.
Oh, that's
And
yeah. You
so,
hear about those all the time where they bust them when they show up at the
right,
hotel or
right,
whatever, and
right.
people that do that. And that's gotta, I mean, how do you separate some of the things that you hear and learn when you go home at night, when you're not working? I some
Yeah,
of the things that cops see that EMT workers see, and how do you I'm in awe of that, if they can actually separate.
yeah, it's something where you just have to compartmentalize a little bit, and I have to focus on um, the end goal, which is
Sure.
getting a story like that out there, because this the new book is going to focus on even more grooming tactics, specifically online tactics, and anybody who lures a 13-year-old girl to a motel, to me, that's pretty evil. So
Oh,
that's
that's
that,
evil. I'm
yeah,
with you, John. I'm sorry. That's yeah. Go ahead.
that's a no-brainer, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's evil. That's horrific. And it's
And
happening every day.
so you're going to see how that happens, and you're also going to see what impact does that have on this officer, and
Yeah.
why is he an interesting person? And so you'll get to know him. You'll see several storylines like that, and so hopefully we can talk in about a year, and I could tell you a lot more about it.
So I'm not too wacky. You'll come back and do the gig with me again.
Definitely,
I'm
yeah,
all
would
over the
definitely
place.
appreciate it.
I again get the book, read the book, share the book, buy it for people. Again, if you're a grandparent, you've got to get the parents to read this. Everybody needs to read it because it's truly an education. Again, John DiGirolamo's book, it's not about the sex, true stories of human trafficking from a law enforcement officer, a survivor, a brothel madam, and an advocate. You've done an incredible job with this. And I love what you're working on next, John. It's so important. It's not about.com. We've got links up. Just go directly to it's not about.com. Honored to certainly do the gig with you this morning. I appreciate your patience with through my wackiness. But nonetheless, I'm very passionate about this book. It's really, really important. And I'm grateful that you did some more importantly, for the work that you do, ongoing
Yeah,
work.
I really appreciate you taking the time and talking about this on your show and having me talk about the issue and talk about the book, and so I think having this kind of interview, and we talked about a lot of different stuff, and I
Yes,
think
we
we
did.
covered a lot, which was great. And I'm really grateful for people like you that
Thanks,
can
Sean.
help in this way.
I couldn't do it without you writing the book and doing the research. So I'm
Yeah,
grateful. Thank you so much.
yeah,
Thank you
yeah.
so much.
Thank
Folks,
you. Yeah, appreciate it.
again, the book, go online. You can get an autographed copy at the website, which is very cool. And all you have to do is go to the website